Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for showing up tonight. So many people. This is great.
Wow.
Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Michael. I'm the events coordinator and publicist at Annie Bloom's Books. For those of you who aren't familiar with the store, we're located in Portland, Oregon, in the heart of Multnomah Village. We've been around for 42 years now, and we are still plugging along despite everything that's going on. Our store is currently closed to browsing, but the staff are at the store every day from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. to answer phones and reply to emails. They love to hear from people looking for book recommendations because we really miss that, not having people come into the store and talk books. So please get in touch with them. And if you can't do that, our website is always open, annieblooms.com, day and night. You can go there and shop for books, including Ellen Michaelson's new book. I'll put a link in the chat here in a minute. We offer curbside pickup, local delivery within 3 miles of the store, and various shipping options. So plenty of ways to get your books from Annie Bloom's. This is our next to the last event of the 2020 reading season. Our final one is going to be on Thursday. It's Marlena Fiel and Sherry Bilol. It's called Choosing Compassion Over Fear, Celebrating World Kindness Day, which I think is on Friday. So that should be good. And we are also thrilled to be partnering with Literary Arts for this year's Portland Book Festival. We're an official bookseller for the event, which is entirely online. It's going on right now, started on the 5th and is going through the 21st. We're the booksellers for one of the quote unquote stages. Got a terrific lineup of events. I'll just mention a couple of the ones that are coming up that you might want to register for and sign up for. On Thursday, November 12th, that's this Thursday, at 6 p.m. Ruman Alam and Jonathan Lethem are going to be together. That should be super cool. And on Friday night, Claire Massoud and Lydia Millett, moderated by Alexander Chi. That's in the afternoon at 2 o'clock. And there's tons of others. You can see those on our website and register from there. Tonight, we are delighted to be hosting Ellen Michaelson in conversation with Natalie Serber. We have Ellen's book on our shelves right now. Even if you have your own copy already, they make great gifts for the holidays for friends and family. We have free gift wrapping at the store, so you can go over there and get plenty more copies. I'll put that in the chat right now.
That's Joel.
There you go. You can click on that. After the reading and conversation, there'll be a Q&A session. You're welcome to type questions in the chat and I'll monitor those, or we'll invite you up on the screen if you like later. So however you feel most comfortable doing that is fine. So Ellen Michaelson, she is a physician in Portland, Oregon, and an MFA graduate from Pacific University. Her work has appeared in creative nonfiction, Portland Monthly, Women in Solitude, SUNY Press, and Literature in Medicine. This is her first book. It's called The Care of Strangers. Winner of the 2019 Miami Fair Groot Prize, The Care of Strangers is a moving story about friendship set in a gritty Brooklyn hospital where a young woman learns to take charge of her life by taking care of others. Working as an orderly in that's the same thing. Sorry, Sima is often reminded of her superiors that she's the least important person there. An immigrant who, with her mother, escaped vicious anti-Semitism in Poland, she spends her shifts transporting patients, observing the doctors and residents, and quietly nurturing her aspirations to become a doctor herself by going to night school. Hold on, there is someone apparently waiting to come in. No, I do not see someone waiting to come in. All right. And now, just one credit short of graduating, she finds herself faltering in the face of pressure from her mother not to overreach and to settle for the life she has now. Everything changes when Sima encounters Mindy Kahn, an intern doctor struggling through her residency. Sensing a fellow outsider in need of support, Sima bonds with Mindy over their patients and learns the power of truly letting yourself care for another person, helping to give her the courage to face her past and take control of her future. A moving story about vulnerability and friendship. The Care of Strangers is a story of one woman's discovery that sometimes interactions with strangers are the best way to find yourself. So Ellen tonight is in conversation with Natalie Serber, who's author of 3 books, Shout Her Lovely Name, which is a New York Times notable book of 2012, and Community Chest, a memoir, and her novel and stories Must Be Nice, which is currently seeking representation. Her fiction has appeared in One Story, Ziziva, Bellingham Review, and others. Natalie is currently working on a memoir. And Community Chest is her most recent published book, I believe. Diagnosed with breast cancer, Natalie Serber did the only thing she could. She wrote her way through the confusion and fear. In this fierce and good-humored memoir, she maintains her sense of gratitude and grace. So, without further ado, Ellen Michaelson and Natalie Serber.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for hosting Ellen and her beautiful book. Ellen, I was so delighted when you invited me to sit in conversation with you with your novella. Ellen had been a student of mine we were just talking before you all arrived, for 10 years, on and off in various classes around Portland, and from working with Right Around Portland and at the Attic, and also in my living room. And I feel so proud and happy to participate in the release of this gorgeous, gorgeous book. If you haven't read it, if you are in store for a terrific reading that is so heart-opening and necessary right now in our time. So, Ellen, thank you for inviting me to participate with you.
It's a pleasure.
Do you want to say a few words before we begin?
No, I'm thrilled to be here, and it's actually release day of the book, and that's very exciting. And I'm thrilled to have you be in conversation with me, because you wrote a wonderful blurb, and you've been a wonderful teacher and mentor and friend, and this is I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really honored. And the other thing I just want to reiterate, I want to thank Annie Blooms for hosting local writers. They're an amazing bookstore that has always done that for people. So let's give a little snap to Michael and Annie Blooms. Thank you so much. And I just also want to reiterate, there'll be time at the end for questions. But if, as we're speaking, something occurs to you, please don't hesitate to type it in the chat. And as Michael has graciously said, he'll monitor the chat so we make sure everybody has a chance to have their question asked. So I would like to begin our conversation tonight by giving Ellen an opportunity to read Dealer's Choice from her book, to introduce us to her words and to the situation in the care of strangers. I'm going to keep holding this up all night. I'm like...
Okay. You can hear me, I presume, right? Can you hear me? Yes.
And if your microphone isn't muted, maybe it would be a nice idea to mute it now, because sometimes that interferes with the audio. So I'm going to mute mine while Ellen is reading.
You can hear me well, correct? Yeah, okay. Okay, this is the last few pages of the first chapter, so I don't have to think you've heard enough to know what will be going on here. Alma May, 85-pound asthmatic, coughed and wheezed again. She couldn't seem to catch her breath. Bella, nurse's aide, lifted the oxygen tubing off her pillow. Alma May flapped her arms. I want Sima, she said. She's got bedside manner and she reads anatomy books. Bella dropped the tubing around the old lady's neck. We all know how smart Sima is. She smirked and stood back from the bed. She's all yours, Dr. Sima. Alma May winked. Sima reads more than books, which is more than I can say for some. Sima untangled the snake of tubing behind Alma May's head. She hid her face behind it so she wouldn't have to respond to Bella's smirk or Alma May's wink. Through the curves of thick plastic, she scanned the ward again. All the beds laid out, a respirator bleeping across the aisle, an IV bag dripping yellow vitamins into Johnson, alcoholic 2 beds down. The food cart in the middle of the room with half-eaten piles of mashed potatoes and the same brown mystery meat they served in the cafeteria. Nurse Armstrong was making her vital sign rounds now, demanding patients open their mouths for her thermometer. Sima placed the oxygen prongs into Alma May's nostrils and secured the tubing behind her wrinkled ears. The skin of Alma May's neck was as sweaty as Sima's own. A hospital with no air conditioning. 20 beds to a ward. She'd read it wasn't legal to have huge open wards anymore, even in inner city hospitals in the 1980s. Sima often hated this place, the disrespectful patients, the staff talking behind the doctors' backs, the level of illness that was everyday business. The shabby street clothes bagged with until discharge. Alma May had no teeth. And then every other double shift, Sima loved it. It was life, right in your face life, every ugly and beautiful fragmented bit of it. New York, New York, where people came from every corner of the world. She loved trying to make sense of it. She hated it. She loved it. Deep in the center of Flatbush, the only white member of the ancillary staff, an invisible immigrant. Hardly anyone noticed her slight accent. Her grammar was good enough to pass as an American. She was an American. Sima, Bella said, get your skinny white ass over here. Sima scurried to the foot of Miss Osborne's bed. She patted the sheet over the woman's feet, and as she moved closer, the schmud, the smell, hit. The woman was sitting in a pool of brown, her face covered by her hands. It's okay, Miss Osborne, Sima said. The ward clerk shouted into the room, Sima, they want you an x-ray. Missy, you ain't going nowhere, Bella said. Sima's an orderly, Alma May piped up. Call one of them housekeeping folk. Sima pulled her shoulders back. Alma May smiled at her, motioned her toward the door. She was about to walk away when two interns appeared, stethoscopes flung around their necks. The male in short sleeves with a royal blue tie was barking orders at the female, the pockets of her short white intern jacket stuffed with test tubes, rubber gloves, note cards. Sima, they need you now, the ward clerk said. Oh my Lord, this ward stinks. She stepped toward Miss Osborne's bed and pointed to the brown mess on the floor. And suddenly the male intern was at the bedside with sterile containers, only ready to catch his stool samples. Miss Osborne, now the center of attention, peeked through her fingers at the handsome, eager beaver intern scrambling to remove a red lid on each of his three containers. Bella was on one side and Sima on the other, placed a hand on Miss Osborne's elbow, her skin hot from fever, but dry and velvety, the bone with a small knob. Sima could only imagine what it was like to live, to lie in a bed with a swarm of nurses and orderlies constantly prodding. Doctors young enough to be your own children, focused on your oozing stool. She could feel Miss Osborne's arm shake, her whole body. It's okay, Miss Osborne, Sima said. Everything's gonna be all right. Sima didn't know everything was gonna be all right. She'd seen how doctors could so easily take hope away. If she'd learned nothing else at the county, she'd come to know that the one thing patients wanted to hold on to was hope. She wasn't sure how much she had for herself in this life, if she'd ever do more than push poor people through the dark hospital hallways on their next desperate trudge. But maybe hope was something.
Thank you, Ellen. That was so beautiful. I think that there's so much about your book that is particularly relevant today as we see the ACA coming up in front of the Supreme Court, and we know so many people are suffering. And I just wondered, before we get into a conversation about the writing, which is so beautiful, if you wanted to talk a little bit about, writing is always political, whether or not it's our intention as the writer. And can you talk about perhaps the condition of care for the patients and the staff and the doctors in the novella, and also in your own training when I believe you were an intern in Brooklyn, is that correct? Am I right?
Yeah, I trained in a big inner city hospital, Kings County, and I actually dedicated the book to them. It's loosely based on experiences there. I don't really remember what I made up and what I didn't, but I had to look it up recently because I remember, God, these people had no health care. They had us for health care, but they didn't have health care outside. And I kind of try to remember, gee, did we have insurance? When did that start? And we did have insurance because I remember that. The city hospital is and I don't know what it's like anymore, but it's a beast unto itself. And people come from there with no insurance. They used to come with no insurance from all over the world. We had lots of immigrants, people who had very little and they were poor. It's a great place to learn to take care of people. Hopefully we did a good job taking care of them. And, I think we did. We weren't as supervised as people are nowadays. People like to go to inner city hospitals to work, to train, because we were in charge. there was nobody there at night but the interns and the residents, and we were in charge of everybody. I know. So yeah, it's a little scary to think back. Who knows? So you know, that it's a tough place, but it was a wonderful place in so many ways.
You know, it's interesting that you say that you guys were in charge, because it's the same thing for a writer. When we're writing about our characters and situations, we're in charge too. And I wonder, when you were writing this book, were the politics of it and the socioeconomic strata and the racial strata, was that prominent in your mind, or were you just working from the characters or the situation? What was driving you as you were working on this book?
Mostly the characters and the intimacy between the strangers. I didn't. I was obvious. Most of the patients were people of color. The doctors and, you know, a rare other person were white. So that was obvious. So, you know, it wasn't something that I thought about day to day, because it was just there. It was the background. So I didn't think of it at that time. But and yeah, so I didn't think of it when I was there, and I didn't think of it so much when I was writing. I was just writing about these people in this place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I wonder about, I guess, just to circle around the politics that are inherent in your book. There's so much that's happening in our world now that's reflected. And I wonder, I know that there's writers in our community listening right now to our conversation. And some of us, and I know that you had the opportunity to draw on the wealth of your experience as a young doctor in this particular city, in this particular hospital. But there's many of us that don't have that kind of experience to draw from. And I think in the time of COVID, in the time of social unrest and injustice, that a lot of creatives potentially feel like, why does my work matter now?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if there's anything that you have to say about that. Like, are you able to work on different things now? Were you, as you were writing this book, did you feel that you had this intense purpose that was driving you to talk about politics and everything that's going on? Or
I always felt it was, I mean, materials always called to me. It took a long time to finish this, but I never got bored with it. And I always thought it was important stuff, but, and it was just, it was meaty. It felt like it mattered. And so I never gave up on it, you know, a few moments here and there, but never seriously gave up on it. And I think it's, you know, I am working on other things, and you know, it's I don't know, it's not odd, it's timely that this book is coming out at this time, that it's so timely. I mean, it could have come out 5 years ago and it would have been timely, but not in the way it is now. It's just the way it is, and I guess its time had come. And I'm very glad for it to be out there at this time. So so, you know, I don't know. I mean, there's always politics, you know, there's politics in everything. So I think, you know, you can write about something that doesn't happen to do with inner city people or poor people, and there's politics, there's hierarchy, there's power struggles. I don't think it has to be just about this. And I don't know.
yeah, it's an interesting conundrum that
Yeah.
I experienced at this time too. I don't know other writers in the room. So many wonderful people have come to hear about your book tonight, and I think that many of them may be writers, and I just know that when we don't have that experience to plumb like you do, it sometimes feels difficult to face the page and say, why does what I have to say matter at a time like this?
Well, I think you know, I was doing a little nonfiction workshop in the spring with Brian Benson, and I was feeling it. It was all at the beginning of COVID. It was when George Floyd, all that stuff was happening. We were going through it all together, and it was hard to write about. And there were a couple of weeks when we didn't, you know, and I couldn't write about anything. I did write a little piece about anxiety related to COVID. And I was kind of shocked that, you know, how it came out for me and what it was saying, because I didn't think of myself as an anxious person, nervous, but not necessarily anxious. And there it was. And so, yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. But I think material, everybody has their material, and you have to believe in your material and believe that that's something that's important, that you feel that you have something to say, you want to say something. Not that you have to say it, but that you want to say something and stick with your own material. You can't write what somebody else writes because that seems like it's going to sell or whatever. You have to write what works for you.
Right. And I think we also have to believe that the emotions that we all feel are universal emotions, whatever situation causes those emotions to arise.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you just mentioned is that you were able to stick with the work. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how long it took you to write this book, and maybe a little bit about frustration and how to push through.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, I suppose, I mean, I started a very long time ago. I'd say it's more than 20 years. Maybe I don't have it counted at all. And it wasn't all the time. It was off and on. There's times when I didn't abandon it, but I didn't know what to do with it and worked on something else for a while. And then I went and did an MFA because I thought, well, you know, I've got this book and I knew it needed work and I didn't know what else to do. And so I've not flailed around, but I've looked around for people to help me figure it out. And it took a very long time. You know, I was sort of resistant to a lot of things over time.
No.
You can't imagine that. You know me. Yeah, I'm pretty stubborn. You know, I don't like to listen to what other people have to say. Finally, a year and a half ago, I said, damn it, beginning, middle, and end, blah, 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 blah. And it just, you know, it's not like it just fell in place because most of it was there, but I finally did some stuff that needed to be done. Like, just have the characters say it and move on. And then my editor, you know, I came to see an editor and she said, oh, well, this is very good, but this is only 3 pages. Can we expand this a little? You know, so, you know, I managed to get it out and have the characters say it, but it wasn't done yet. So that, you know, and then there were frustrations. At one point I submitted it to a bunch of contests and I was a semifinalist or finalist in like 6. And I thought, oh, well, that's nice, but it's not a book contract. And then, you know, I went through different things, and I was given up on contests until someone suggested, you know, that I submitted to a contest. And then I had to cut a bunch of pages, and I don't know, that led to this. And finally, you know, it was like, okay, this is it. I'm going to do it. And I felt like, you know, I had, and luckily someone agreed with me. A few people agreed with me.
A lot of people agreed with you. In fact, you have a beautiful blurb from Charlie Baxter on the cover.
Oh, that was amazing. Yeah.
So fantastic.
Yeah. That was really
So we've talked about some of the frustration around it, and we've talked about some of the politics. I wonder if maybe we could have you do another bit of reading.
Okay.
For us right now. I'd like it if you could read the section that begins on page 108.
Yeah, sure.
And maybe you could give it a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah. How many revisions did I endure? I have no idea. I don't know. I have no idea. It's a good question, but so this is kind of in the middle of the book, and there's a patient who had been in the hospital. His name is Mr. Strom, and he is one of the few white people to have been admitted to the hospital, and he is a Ukrainian. And as you'll find out, Ukrainians and Polish people can understand each other, and Sima is involved in helping with him. And he dies, and then now Dr. Kahn, Mindy, is the intern who is supposed to tell the family about the death. So that's where we are right now. We're going to face that. The Strom family huddled in the corridor outside the double doors to the CCU. A clan of people pacing and mumbling to each other, short and not so short, skinny and round, some with curly brown hair and some blonde, 2 or 3 wearing glasses and hats. The babushkas clutching purses to their chests. That was all Sima could see at first of these old country people Aunt Miriam left Poland to get away from. They sounded like an unruly school brood at recess. When she was little, the children of these people threw rotten tomatoes at her, spit at her, kike, dirty Jew. She didn't pull out her Star of David and wave it in their faces, but at that very moment, she wanted them to feel what she had seen in her own father's eyes when a Ukrainian doctor said he couldn't do anything for the son of a Jew, and her baby brother died, and her father was never the same again. Her mother couldn't forgive her father, and Sima's life was never the same again. A woman in an ankle-length brown dress set a large bowl of potatoes and onions covered in plastic down on the floor. Immigrant families often brought bowls of food that smelled of home. She elbowed the man standing next to a very old woman. Trimaiti Yi, she said, hold on to her. I'm Dr. Kahn, Mindy said. Does anyone in the family speak English? A little blonde boy with a cowlick squirmed up close to Mindy. He reached into Mindy's jacket pocket. One of the babushkas grabbed him by the arm and yanked him away. Mindy folded her arms across her chest. We need a translator, she said. Sima here speaks their language, Nurse Armstrong said to Mindy. You're Polish, Mindy said. Ukrainian and Polish are similar, Sima replied. She couldn't look at Mindy. She couldn't bear to look at Mrs. Strom or the rest of the family. The words are a little different, but we can understand each other. Nurse Armstrong led the family to the isolation room where they moved patients with contagious diseases, the only area with any privacy. There was a single bed with an unsheeted mattress, no pillow, and one chair at the far end away from the door. One family member huddled to the next. Sima scanned the clan. The room felt like a coffin. Mindy stationed herself against one wall. Her hands gripped the ends of the stethoscope hanging around her neck. Tell Mrs. Strom her husband had a very bad heart. Sima's first words came out too loud. She said in Polish, your husband had a bad heart. She wasn't a doctor, but she knew, first, do no harm. When Sima stopped talking, Mrs. Strom's mouth wrinkled into a hole. Bad heart, the woman in the long brown dress said in broken English. Sima noticed the embroidery down one sleeve of the dress, red and green with tiny threads of blue, hand sewn. Their eyes met for a long moment. Sima nodded to confirm. The daughter squeezed her mother's arm. She put her free hand up to her chest and struck it. Bad heart, the daughter said, yeah. Tell her he had a heart attack at the other hospital, Mindy said. Nurse Armstrong pulled the chair out from the wall. Let Mrs. Strom sit down, she said. Sima said in Polish to the daughter, your mother should sit down. The sleeve of the daughter's dress brushed up alongside Sima's bare, weary arm. She leaned into the softness for a moment, caught the eye of the daughter. Then she moved closer to one side of Mrs. Strom, closer to the smell of boiled onion, and helped the daughter settle her mother the way she and Miss Armstrong had not been able to do with the old man in the CCU. Mindy bumped into the unmade bed and the bed knocked against the wall. The sound of creaky metal wheels on hospital tile jolted everyone in the room. The daughter leaned in towards Sima. She said, tell me, please, tell me about my father. Sima felt her own heartbeat quicken. Her own father, she could see his face. And then the cowlick boy stepped out. He grabbed hold of the finger of the rubber glove sticking from Mindy's pocket and pulled on it. Snap, snap, snap. Mindy stood there, a sullen face on. He should have stayed at that hospital in New Jersey, she said. Why didn't he stay there? Miss Armstrong glared at Mindy. Dr. Kahn was all she said. Sima yanked the glove out of Mindy's pocket and handed it to the boy. She said to the daughter, your father's heart was bad at the other hospital. The child held the glove up to Mindy. Mrs. Strom and her daughter talked back and forth to each other. Mrs. Strom said, bad hospital, bad hospital. The daughter looked to Sima. She said, we were afraid there. No one spoke our language. No, stay. Polish words came out of Sima's mouth and Ukrainian words came back at her. Papa this and Papa that, Papa the same in any language. Back and forth, the foreign words filled the air, Polish, Ukrainian, broken English. They want to see Mr. Strom, Sima said. And then she wanted to tell the daughter that Mindy had just lost her father too. It was a doctor's job to attend to strangers, to put aside the pain of dead fathers and persecution for the moment, and yet connect with all of it at the same time. That's all she said. Mindy sank back into the bed. The boy put the glove up to his mouth and blew. Sima surveyed the room. Mindy, the motley troop of family members standing quietly now, the old woman, the daughter, the boy breathing hard, the only sound in the room. She knelt beside the daughter on the floor by Mrs. Strom. They were two young women without fathers. Her own papa lost a 6-year-old Sima long before he died. Something in Sima let the old country fall away. She looked up at Mindy, then back to the daughter. They were 3, not Ukrainian, not Polish, not American. She said to the daughter, I too have lost my father. The doctor just lost her father. We understand. The boy continued blowing into the glove, the fingers stretching bigger and longer. Everyone in the room watched the boy's cheeks puff out as he blew. He took another breath and then he lost his grip. The air inside the glove farted back into his face and the glove shot out of his hands. It shriveled to the floor. The boy laughed with his whole body. We gave him medication for his chest pain, Mindy blurted out over the laughter. The daughter reached for Mindy. Die, she said. Papa die? Mindy nodded, her face a blank. The old woman raised her eyes to Sima, who was kneeling still alongside her daughter. She put a hand to Sima's face. Sima took the old woman's hand and held it between her 2 hands. She nodded. She said, your husband has died. She nodded to the daughter. Your father is dead. Mrs. Strom's head tilted back, her eyes closed. She leaned into her daughter, who was standing by the side of the chair. Ne pravda, this can't be. The old woman rocked back and forth in her seat. The chair shifted off center, threatening to tip. Mama, the doctor said. She put her arms around her mother, both of them wailing. Then the little boy began to cry. The daughter reached for the hand of the boy. She pulled him toward the chair and closed him with her mother. The little boy's cries were muffled in the clothes of his elders. The other family members stepped in closer. Miss Armstrong leaned toward the old woman. She smoothed the sweater bunched at the widow's shoulders. Let's get her onto the bed, she said to Sima. Over her shoulder, Sima saw Mindy leaning back against the bed, her pale face, the face of her mentor, her friend. She glanced at the family, the daughter holding her mother and the boy, and up at Miss Armstrong. We can handle this, Sima said. Yes, Miss Armstrong said. I believe you can.
So beautiful, Ellen.
Thank you.
There's so much I want to commend and talk about in that section. First of all, you have such a fantastic eye for detail, and what a great tension relief to have that little boy playing with the rubber glove. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing that you have happening there. I want to call out the sentence, it was a doctor's job to attend to strangers, to put aside the pain of dead fathers and persecution for the moment, and yet connect with it all at the same time. That's just such a gorgeous sentence and such a true sentence, and speaks so much to humanity and what we're asked to do and how we're asked to show up.
Yeah.
I wonder about writing about grief. I wonder about this triangle that you've created of these women grieving over the deaths of their fathers. And our country is facing such a tremendous load of grief right now. And going forward, we're going to be faced with more and more. And I wonder your feelings about reading about grief and writing about grief as catharsis. Is that something that you feel is true? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. I don't know. As you were reading, as you were speaking, I remembered, the first story I wrote about that led to starting this book was related to the death of my own father, and Mindy's death, the death of her father, was based on the father's death. And I think I've put it at a distance for a lot of years. And as you were talking, I could, it was touching a little note in me for sure that I didn't intend to do that. That wasn't how I started out, and it still isn't even. But clearly people's deaths and how they died and the circumstances and how it affects people is huge, and it leaves lasting marks, imprints on people's lives, on their personalities. And I think, I think some people don't get over things. There's some things you just don't get over. But writing about it can help. I think it can help, and looking at it and trying to look at it. I think one thing I remember doing way back when I started writing, I was like, I used to write about got tired of hearing in my journal, oh, woe is me, I'm depressed. And they're just like, this is boring. And I just, but you can start, I would start seeing myself as a character and start writing about my feelings from the point of view of a character, not necessarily myself. And I think that's what I learned from Tom Spanbauer, and what a lot of writers do. We don't necessarily put our personal story in there, but you take some emotions from what you feel and what you've experienced and put it onto characters, and then create a story around that, and often go beyond it in different places that have nothing to do specifically with your life, but it's a starting place. And I think it can help. I hope it can help. I have to believe it can, because I do this, but it does. I know that when I'm writing, I'm a happier person most of the time. Not all the time.
James McBride talked about that, about how people asking if his novels are true, and he said they all start from an emotional truth. And writing about an emotional truth, I think, is somewhat of a salve. For me, I know it is. But even more so is the generous gift that the writer brings to the reader when they, as you just said, you plumbed the experience of the loss of your own father. And what a generous act to share that through a character with a reader who then can say, oh my gosh, somebody knows what it feels like to grieve. I feel known. I'm not alone in my grief or in my feelings of incompetence or whatever it is, or in my joy. So what a beautiful thing that you were able to do that.
And I think another thing that hit me when in writing this book, and that it was experience of Mindy, is that she came back after her father's death, and they just stuck her in CCU. Her father died of a heart attack. I mean, we as trainees going through it, and I unfortunately think that it hasn't changed that much, that we didn't learn to take care of each other. When one of us was sick or one of us was out, I mean, I remember getting sent home because I was too sick, but I wouldn't tell anybody I was sick. I said, you got to go home, because if I stayed out, it meant more work for other people. And so we didn't really learn to take care of ourselves, each other, as physicians. And I think that trickles down, because we're supposed to be humanistic, we're supposed to be sensitive, we're supposed to be all this and that, but we also have to be tough, and we have to get through it. And that affects how we interact with our patients and with everybody else. And I think if people can pull on their own vulnerability, we all have tender places, we all have vulnerability, and that pulling on that, touching on that vulnerability can allow us to connect with other people in a way that's deeply human. And it's not just about, oh, your blood pressure, you need to increase this medication. There's more to it than that. And I think if we can each do that, if we can let ourselves feel our places and understand that that's, other people have been there too in different ways, that can really help.
And so it's so interesting, because one of the questions that I had posited with you that I would ask is about this relationship between Mindy and Sima. And there's definitely a power hierarchy between these two women, and yet they do have an intimacy. And Mindy leans in hard to Sima for help. And I'm wondering, if Mindy didn't have the vulnerable experience that she did, do you think these two women would have come to the same relationship, or do you think that it rose out of vulnerability?
I think it rose out of vulnerability. I think, Sima initially saw them, well, they're both Jewish, even though Sima was an immigrant. But first it was like, I want to be a doctor. This woman is kind of messing up. What's with her? And she was, puzzled by that. But I think, and I think Sima, Mindy's trying to be tough, and she's got, she's struggling. She's not as tough as she wants to be. And Mindy is tough. Sima is tougher than she thinks she is. And so I think the vulnerability that Mindy had, and Sima's touching, when they realized about they both lost fathers, and not, Sima's was a long time ago, but connecting with Mindy on that helped Sima. Connecting from her own vulnerability helped her connect to Mindy and see that there was more to the way that they were similar and they can connect than just because they were Jewish and aspiring to be doctors. There was a lot more to it. And I think that vulnerability enabled them to be closer. I don't know if that would have happened otherwise, because Mindy would have been tougher and pushed Sima around, and Sima wouldn't have seen an opening or wouldn't have tried, or maybe she would have tried and gotten shot down, but maybe not. You know, it's hard to say. I don't know, but less likely. I think the vulnerability had a lot to do with it.
It certainly gave Sima an opportunity to shine.
Yeah, yeah,
To
yeah.
shine,
And she didn't know she could. Yeah,
to
wasn't something.
shine both by coming to understand how smart she actually is, but also to shine to reach out beyond her own pain and support somebody else in pain.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
we hope all of our doctors will do, right?
Yeah.
I wonder, speaking of that, I know that you have a pet project with narrative medicine, and I wondered if you wanted to just say few words about that.
Yeah, we and some of my narrative medicine folks, well, they are. I can see somebody up there. Hi, Alexis. Yeah, well, you know, what we do in narrative medicine, I mean, we're kind of preaching to ourselves, preaching to our choir, hopefully beyond us, but that we all believe that by listening and by being willing to hear somebody's story and to absorb their story, that it helps us move us to action. And that's kind of the core of narrative medicine. And so we once a month get together and we read little bits of short stories or poetry, or we look at a piece of art and we try to write about it and then share it between us. And I thought that was who. He's got a beard and all that.
It's my PR delivery. It's my PR boy.
Yeah, no, I know that guy. Hi there, Joel. I saw him on the screen. I wasn't sure who it was. But anyway, so what was I saying? Narrative medicine. Yeah. So we that's really what we do, and we're working on a number of interesting projects. And I'm going to be doing a workshop in, I think it's January, with stuff related to my book with Alexis. She's going to help me and talk about strangers and talk about that interaction, that intimacy that's created, and when does somebody stop becoming a stranger, which is how I don't even want to talk about that now. That's another whole thing that I don't have an answer to, but.
So I thought we might take a moment now to open up to questions from the community. And then I'm going to pull back about 5 minutes before the end of our time, because I want to pretend I'm that guy from the Actors Studio with like 5 rapid fire questions.
Are those to me? Questions to me?
Yeah.
I know, this is the part I'm worried about. We'll see how it goes. You get me sometimes. I might refuse to answer something.
That's fine. You can take it.
Okay.
We have a question in the chat from Sue Stotts.
Yeah.
The novel is set in the 80s during a plague, AIDS, that wasn't well understood. You're now practicing medicine in a plague that's not well understood. Do you see similarities?
Yeah. That's good for Sue to ask me that question. Sue's a good friend of mine from MFA. Well, yes, there are similarities, but a lot of differences too. In the days of the early AIDS epidemic, we didn't understand a lot. We didn't understand how it got transmitted. We knew it was people were afraid to drink from a cup from their gay son. When I was in the hospital there, we talked about the 5 H's, the 4 H's, people who got AIDS, and that was hemophiliacs, heroin addicts, now I'm forgetting what the other, heroin addicts, hemophiliacs, Haitians and homosexuals. Haitians were in there. It was a political thing and it got dropped somewhere along the line afterwards. But so the fear was based in not knowing how it transmitted. It's a little different now because anybody can get it, and we don't know, but some people are more vulnerable to it than others. So, but the fear and the craziness that comes out of people's fears, the things they do and the things they don't do, and their behavior, how their behavior is affected, is similar. And it's a big unknown. You know, there's just so much unknown and scariness because we just don't know. And that's similar.
Jacqueline de la Harpe wants to know, what was the hardest part about writing this book? What is the most important thing that you'd like readers to understand from reading your book?
I don't know what was the hardest thing. I think just putting in the time over the year. I don't know that it didn't seem, I mean, it was hard. I don't know. It was, I think really changing and moving with it. Persistence, but that's kind of my middle name. I'm really good at persistence, even when I should give up. Sometimes I keep persisting. So in this case, it turned out to be a good thing to persist. I think the biggest take home thing is what we've been talking about vulnerability and being able to connect with our vulnerability and use that to be able to connect with other people and to have sympathy for other people, and to also understand that some people don't get over some things, some people do, and we all have our tough things. And if we can reach out to people and not be afraid of that, not be afraid that we're going to, it's not contagious. It's not contagious to hear somebody else is having a hard time. We all have had hard times.
From Katja Bysans, are you connected to Dina Metzger, Revisioning Medicine, or Louis Madrona, Coyote Medicine, also exploring story and medicine, and also both writers?
No, I don't know either of their names, and I'd be happy to. Katja can send me an email. We've known each other for a little workshop we were in. She can, yeah, I don't know those people.
All right.
I'd be happy to learn about them.
Liz Prado wants to know, I came in late, so I apologize if this was already addressed. Why did you decide to write a novel and not a memoir?
I've become a little more interested in lyric and so-called creative nonfiction, but I had no interest in writing a memoir. I just, even when I've been writing little short pieces now, I feel like it's scarier in some ways because you really put yourself there out on the page in a different way. And I'm more comfortable taking some emotion or some story and making things up and going with that. But I never had an interest in writing a memoir. And I still don't really.
Fair enough. Elizabeth Lottie wants to know, are you working on another project now? And
yes, my narrative medicine cohort there in crime. I have. I've been toying with an idea, and I still don't know. I have no idea how I'm going to do this, or am I going to do it? I've got a bunch of short nonfiction pieces that I feel like they're sort of lyric. It's creative nonfiction, which I guess is a little different from memoir. I can't quite exactly tell you. But I have some short stories, and some of them cover some of the same material. And I've been toying with the idea. I've heard that people have done now memoirs that are memoir along with poetry or with art or with other things. Again, I'm not really interested in writing a memoir, but I'm interested in the perspective that comes from looking at things from different angles. And what is a story about X person in a purely in a fictional version versus in a more creative nonfiction piece, and maybe blending them. I haven't figured out a structure. I don't know if this is doable, so I'm far from it's just something that I'm toying with. I don't know if it's ever really been quite done. Maybe it has, so I don't know. But I don't know. That's what I'm thinking about. Or it'll just be something else.
I just want to interrupt real quickly. Sherman Alexie did that with the memoir about his mother.
Oh.
I forget what it was called. Maybe Michael remembers that book. But it had a lot of poetry, and it was memoir all wrapped up with snippets of scene and poetry. But I just wonder though, Ellen, because in light of Liz's question, or maybe yeah, it was Liz, about why a novel, why not a memoir. I heard you speaking so much about the characters as if they were real people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder about that blurred line between novel and memoir. I think there's that famous quote from, who wrote Cowboys Are My Weakness?
Yeah, I know.
This
Not
is
programming. I'm blocking her name. Yeah.
It's a village.
Pam Houston.
Yes,
Pam,
thank you.
thank you.
And she said
Thank you very much, Pam Houston. Yep.
when she wrote fiction, she said that it was, you know, they would say, how much of this is true? And she would say, oh, I don't know, about 70%. And then when she did the memoir, that he said, finally, we get the other 30%. And she said, no, it's about 70%. It was the same thing. So I'm curious about, did you feel that you were revealing things from your own life? Did you ever have a temptation to make it memoir?
Never had a temptation. It was never been in my consciousness to ever to do that. I felt like sometimes the big thing I learned in trying to write fiction, wanting to write fiction, was letting go of the actual facts, the things that actually happened. If I could let go, well, it doesn't matter if she walked through this door or that door. What happened on the other side of the door? And once I could let go of those, it doesn't matter right or left. That's where I'm going and that's where I need to go. And that freed me up to be able to do it. And that was the big lesson I had to learn, because initially I'd write a lot of little things about, oh, this happened and that happened, but it wasn't fiction, it wasn't memoir, but memoir wasn't something in my consciousness at all. So I wasn't thinking about that. I was trying to get to fiction beyond facts, beyond real, beyond memoir type things. Yeah.
We have
Go ahead.
an anonymous question here. Your medical work affected your writing. Has your writing affected how you practice medicine?
That's from my nephew, the doctor. Has writing affected my medicine and vice versa? Well, I think when I am writing, I feel more connected to my empathetic self. I try to be. You know, you go into the office and then you get busy and this happens and that happens and 5 people are pulling at you for 6 different directions. You're going to call and the telephone rings and you're late and you're this and that. And it's very hard to hold on to that empathetic self and to feel connected. And it's very hard to live moment to moment, being really present and not get into all this stuff. And the writing, retreating to the writing helps me a lot to remember what's important and what I value, and to then be able to take that back in. It's always a challenge to take it back in, but what it does help is when I'm sitting with patients. I had my own practice for 10, 12 years, and it was really a narrative medicine practice. I mean, I would listen, and I still managed to see patients in half-an-hour blocks, not 15-minute blocks, because people want to be heard. They don't want to necessarily see the medical assistant or the lab technician or whatever. They want to be heard. And even my patients who come in for something simple, I've kind of trained them. Okay, they've got their 30 minutes and we can talk, and we talk about whatever. And so it has helped in that regard, because I really want to hear their stories, and that's what makes me care about them. And I guess it's a good example of how narrative medicine can help, because it instills in me the desire to help them more, because I know them as a human being and I know why X and Z is important to them, and I want to help them get to that place.
We have a question from Heather Sappenfield. Has the process of bringing a book into the world helped you grow or changed you as a writer?
Heather is another good friend from MFA. It's interesting. It's been very different. I mean, I didn't know what to expect. It's been a lot of things. Has it changed me? I think I have. It has been stressful in some ways, and I think part of me creating a website was stressful a little bit. And it was create new skills that I had to develop. I had to spread my wings and do different things that are different from writing, and then different from anything else I do in medicine. And so doing all that on top of my regular day job was also a challenge. And it has been stretching me, and I don't know yet where it's taking me and how it's changing me. I mean, it is changing me, and it certainly, to come to think, people ask me a question and then about a writing thing, is like, oh, they actually want to hear what I have to say, because now I'm an author, and somebody's going to listen to what I have to say. And so I think, oh, I better think about what I'm going to say and, make it matter. So that's changed, and that's interesting, and also myself realizing, not that I can still learn from other people, but I have learned a lot, and I don't know how to do everything for sure. And they say every book is different. Every book is hard. But I have more confidence in the fact that I have learned a lot, and I hope to continue to learn. I mean, I'm always learning. I feel like it doesn't really stop.
I am so glad to hear you say that you have confidence and that you have learned a lot. And so I want to ask you, who influences you? What writers influenced you?
That's a good question. There's a lot of them, and I put a pile of books next to my desk here of the people I've been reading more recently. Who have influenced me? I mean, it often is a matter of who I'm reading at the time. And most recently, I've discovered that since I wrote a shorter book, it became a shorter book. I've never been somebody who really likes big fat books, 400, 600 page books. I'm a shorter book person. And I discovered through also David Long was in our program at Pacific would always come out with these lists of short novels, long novels, all these kind of novels. He's got, so, and I discovered I had quite a few of his short novels on my bookshelf and I hadn't read them. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to read these. And the ones I've read most recently, which I've just been reading over and over again, one is called Leaving Brooklyn by Lynn Sharon Schwartz. And she had written 6 novels and she didn't know if she had another book in her. And she was working on an essay about social justice. And she started writing this stuff and she finally came to a point where she said, she wanted to make stuff up. She wanted to change it. And then she started writing different things. And she started writing about her eye, started with something concrete. And then it became this book. And so I really related to that because I thought, oh, what am I going to do next? But it's just beautiful the way she moves back and she moves a lot in time and goes in different places. And another book I found on the shelf was The Lover by Marguerite Duras. And I've read that at least 3 times. It's just the way it moves around in time is just beautiful. I read Carson McCullers, The Member of the Wedding, which is a pretty straightforward narrative, but again, beautifully done. And those are the 3 that I've been, I said to myself when I started the MFA, I said, oh, maybe I should just, reread the books that I've read before. That would be a good thing to do. Not really knowing that, what I was going to do with that, and really I really wasn't all that keen on doing that, even though I said that's what I wanted to do. But now I'm doing it, and I think with a shorter book, it's easier to do that because I can wrap my head around the whole thing. And I've read all of these books several times. Another book I really liked was A Prayer for the Dying by Stuart Onan, and he thinks of it as a dark, an evil dark comedy, but it's about a diphtheria epidemic post-Civil War. And I never saw it as this, this dark kind of thing. I just thought it was a very interesting story. And it's from second person point of view, but you don't really feel it. Sometimes second person is overbearing. Most people don't write in it for very much, but it really works in this novel. And it's a relatively short novel too. So I don't know, those are people that I'm thinking about most recently. So many other people have influenced me over time, but it's hard to pinpoint if there's any one particular person I picked up.
I like that you've fallen in love with a form. I like that you're sort of obsessed with this form and have fallen in love with it. I wanted to ask you, do you write to escape things or to face things?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know, maybe a little bit of both. I mean, I think, I don't write fantasy. I'm a very realistic writer. So I'm not trying to get away from the world totally and create a whole different world. So I like to explore things that are going on, but I also like to go into a story that's about stuff and read things that really aren't necessarily about me or any close to me. So I think a little bit of both. Yeah.
Well, Ellen, I am so proud of you and so proud to have been a small part of your beautiful book's journey. Everybody, this book is gorgeous and it is just a solve to read right now because there's so much love between these characters as they come to discover one another. We're all very lucky that Ellen's book has made it into the world. And Ellen, it was an absolute treat to be in conversation with you. Congratulations. I think everybody, let's give a big snap to Ellen.
Thank you. And this was so much.
People that are here. Ellen,
I know. This was so much fun and it was really fun. I wanted to have fun with you and I think we did. It was really wonderful. Yeah.
Super fun for me. And I want to encourage you all, buy the book. Buy it from Annie Blooms.
Yes, please do.
Don't just love it from afar.
Thank you, Natalie, for
Thank
plugging Annie Blooms. And thank you both for being here. It was a really great reading. And thanks to everyone who showed up, more than 60 people. That's really awesome.
Yeah. Can I say one other thing?
Yes, please.
The Miami Book Fair, which sponsored me, which got me here, unfortunately, I don't get to go to Miami, which I was supposed to be doing, but it is actually starting on the 15th. And I am on day one. I'm doing another a conversation, and everything's been pre-recorded there, but I can put it on the thing, or it's miamibookfaironline.com. I can stick it up on the chat. And I think the way it works is, I don't know, I still can't quite figure it out. I don't think there's a schedule that you read live at a certain time. It's sort of like how the Portland Book Festival is going. I don't know. They haven't really made it clear to me. But
well, we all have to find some reason to like Florida.
Yeah.
Let's make it Ellen. Let's make Ellen the reason that we have something to like about Florida.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did online.com. And if you go on there, then it tells you magically. I haven't figured it out yet how to do, but there's my picture, a couple blocks down from Margaret Atwood, because there's a lot of really great writers there. And I guess you click it on November 15th, which is Sunday, and then it goes live magically. I can't tell you more than that how it works, but I'm gonna have to figure it out. But I don't know. I keep asking, and they just say, here's the schedule. It's like, okay, it doesn't say anything. So it just says November 15th, so I don't know.
All right. Well, congratulations again.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It deserves all the love it is getting.
I appreciate it. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.